David Morales, a 28-year-old young man, lives in a small apartment on the 12th floor of a high-rise building in downtown Chicago. From his apartment window, he can see the Chicago River shimmering under the city lights, but that view cannot soothe the emptiness gnawing at his soul. David works for a tech startup in the Loop, where the frenetic pace of life and the pressure of sales targets make him feel as though he's caught in a relentless machine. Each day he wakes up at 6 a.m., squeezes onto the L train to get to the office, works late into the night, and returns to his apartment exhausted. Despite a stable income, he remains haunted by a student loan debt exceeding $40,000, 0 cents, and an uncertainty about what the future holds. David grew up in a Mexican Catholic family in Little Village, a vibrant corner of Chicago where the aroma of tacos from food carts mingles with the sound of mariachi music every weekend. His mother, Maria, is a devout woman who always carries a rosary in her purse. Every Sunday, she would take David and his younger sister, Sophia, to St. Agnes Church, where the community gathered for Mass. There, David memorized the Our Father by the age of 5. He still recalls the evenings gathered around the dinner table when Maria would lead the family in prayer before the meal, her warm voice resonating, "Our Father who art in heaven." But that was a story from his childhood. Now, that faith has faded like a painting bleached by time. For David, the Our Father is merely a string of familiar words, no different from the nursery rhymes he sang in kindergarten. He hasn't set foot in a church since starting college, and prayer to him is something that belongs to his mother and the past. David's life now revolves around other things. He spends weekends meeting friends at bars in Wicker Park, sipping craft beer and talking about tech projects or the latest Netflix series. But those moments of fun only temporarily mask his loneliness. On social media, he often scrolls through posts from friends flaunting their perfect lives, exotic vacations, new cars, lavish parties, and wonders why he doesn't feel as happy as they seem. Deep within, a question keeps resurfacing. What am I living for? A deeper pain in David's soul stems from memories of his father, David 1. When David was 8, his father abandoned the family to pursue a new life with another woman. The rare occasions Juan reappeared always ended in arguments with David's mother, leaving David with feelings of betrayal and abandonment. He grew up with the notion that if his own father didn't care about him, how could a God in heaven possibly care about his struggles? From then on, David built an invisible wall between himself and faith, between himself and any notion of a father, whether in heaven or on earth. One winter evening, as heavy snow blanketed Chicago's streets, David sat alone in his apartment, staring out the window. That morning, he had received an email from his boss, informing him that the company was facing financial difficulties and might have to lay off staff. His position as a mid-level software developer was on the review list. The fear of losing his job gripped him. If he lost his job, how would he manage rent, student loans, and the pile of bills? A sense of helplessness overwhelmed him, dragging up painful memories of his father, of his mother crying alone in the kitchen, and of the years he told himself he had to be strong to avoid breaking down. While trying to distract himself by tidying the apartment, David accidentally knocked an old wooden box off a bookshelf. The box fell open, revealing a black leather-bound Bible, a gift from his mother when he graduated high school. On the inside cover, Maria had written, "David, my son, let God guide your path." He flipped through the thin pages, and the book naturally opened to the Gospel of Matthew, where the Our Father was recorded. In the margin, his mother had written in blue ballpoint pen, "This is not just a prayer, David. It is a way to find yourself again and connect with God, your true Father." David sat down on the sofa holding the Bible in his hands. He read the familiar lines again, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." He had recited this prayer hundreds of times, but now it seemed to carry a new weight. Why did Mom say this is the key, he wondered. Driven by curiosity and perhaps a touch of desperation, David decided to explore the true meaning of the Our Father. Little did he know that this journey would transform how he viewed God, himself, and his life. After finding his mother's old Bible, David Morales sat on the sofa in his Chicago apartment, the glow of streetlights filtering through the window illuminating the fragile pages. He read the Our Father again, but this time he paused at the very first line, Our Father, who art in heaven. The word Father made him frown. It stirred painful memories of his earthly father, Juan, who had abandoned the family when David was young. The rare occasions when Juan returned, often after years of absence, only left behind empty promises and arguments with David's mother. For David, the word father was synonymous with disappointment, not comfort. If God is a father, he thought, then why does he let me feel so alone? David decided to dig deeper. He opened his laptop and searched for the meaning of the Our Father online. An online sermon by a pastor from California caught his attention. The pastor explained, "When Jesus taught us to call God Father, he wasn't just giving us a title. He was inviting us into an intimate relationship, like children with a loving father who always listens and protects." This explanation confused David. He had always imagined God as a stern judge, somewhere high above, scrutinizing his every mistake. But a father? That was entirely foreign. He recalled a verse from the Gospel of John that his mother had once read to him. "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me." John 11:41-42. These words were spoken by Jesus before performing the miracle of raising Lazarus from the dead. David wondered, could God truly listen to him the way he listened to Jesus? He had never prayed with the sense that someone was actually paying attention. The rare times he did pray, usually when in trouble, like worrying about college exams or when his mother was ill, were desperate whispers, like tossing a message in a bottle into the ocean, with no hope of a reply. That night, as snow continued to fall outside the window, David decided to try something different. He turned off the lights, sat in the darkness with only the faint glow of a small candle on the table. He closed his eyes and whispered, "God, I don't know if you're really my father. I'm not good at praying, and I'm not even sure I believe in you, but if you're listening, please give me a sign. I'm tired of feeling lost. I need to know if you're real." His prayer was clumsy, unlike the polished prayers he had recited in church, but for the first time, it was sincere. David didn't hear a voice from heaven or see a blinding light, but when he opened his eyes, he felt a strange peace, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He couldn't explain the feeling, but it made him want to keep going. He flipped open the Bible again, reading the phrase, "Who art in heaven." An online article explained that this phrase didn't mean God was distant, but rather emphasized that he is the king of all creation, and heaven is the true home of those who trust in him. Heaven is my home, David thought. The idea that he belonged to something greater than the stressful life in Chicago sparked a glimmer of hope. The next morning, David woke up earlier than usual. He decided to visit his mother in Little Village before heading to work. As he stepped into the small house, the aroma of coffee and homemade churros filled the air. Maria hugged him tightly, as if sensing he needed comfort. During their conversation, David shared about the Bible and his questions about the Our Father. Maria smiled, her eyes lighting up. "David, when I pray Our Father, I imagine myself sitting in God's lap, the way you used to sit in mine when you were little. He's never too busy to listen to you." His mother's words moved David. He remembered the times he ran to her as a child, not because he needed something, but just to be held. Could God really want the same? He began to wonder if the wounds from his father had caused him to build a wall between himself and God. If God was a perfect father, as his mother said, then perhaps he wasn't like Juan, who always put his own interests above the family. On his way back to downtown Chicago, sitting on the L train, David looked out the window, where skyscrapers rose through the early morning mist. He pulled out his phone and jotted down a note. "Today, try thinking of God as a father. Pray like you're talking to him, not just reciting words." As the train pulled into his stop, David felt a new resolve. He wanted to understand the Our Father more deeply, not just to find answers to his current struggles, but to discover if God was truly the Father he had longed for all these years. David Morales began to sense a subtle shift in his heart ever since he tried praying to God as a father. Though still plagued by doubts, he couldn't deny the strange peace that settled over him after each honest conversation with God. Every morning, before catching the L train from his downtown Chicago apartment to his office in the Loop, he would spend a few minutes sitting by the window, sipping his coffee and whispering, "Our Father, who art in heaven." These words were no longer a dry ritual, but were becoming a part of his daily rhythm. Today, as he continued reading the Lord's Prayer from his mother's old Bible, David paused at the phrase, "Hallowed be thy name." He furrowed his brow, trying to grasp its meaning. The word hallowed sounded distant, like something reserved for church, bearing no relevance to his modern life. He opened his laptop and looked up the phrase. One website explained that "hallowed be thy name" is not merely a statement declaring God's name to be holy, but a commitment to live in a way that reflects that holiness. Live to honor God's name? David thought. Have I lived in a way that could be considered honoring anyone? David began to reflect on his life. At work, he frequently faced pressure to meet quotas. To keep his position, he had occasionally lied about project timelines or shifted blame to colleagues when things went wrong. Outside of work, he spent a lot of time scrolling through social media, comparing himself to seemingly more successful people, chasing superficial things like designer clothes or glamorous parties in River North. He realized his life revolved around glorifying himself, not anything greater. One evening, while having dinner with his mother and younger sister Sophia in Little Village, David shared his thoughts. Maria, frying fragrant tamales, turned to him with a gentle smile. "David, when you pray, 'Hallowed be thy name,' you're promising to live in a way that lets people see God's love and truth through you. Not just through words, but through how you treat others, how you work, how you make choices every day." Sophia, now a college student, chimed in. "It's like, if you say God matters but live like money is everything, is that prayer even real?" Sophia's words struck a chord. David recalled a recent situation at work. A colleague, Lisa, had been wrongly blamed by the boss for a technical error that David had actually contributed to. Instead of admitting his role, he had stayed silent, letting Lisa bear the brunt. That act was not only dishonest, it directly contradicted the meaning of honoring God's name. He asked himself, if God's name is holy, am I living in a way that reflects that? The next day at the office, David decided to make a change. When his manager called a team meeting to address the technical issue, David took a deep breath and spoke up. "Sir, I think I need to clarify something. I failed to double-check a segment of code, and that was the primary cause of the problem. Lisa doesn't deserve the blame." The room fell silent. David's heart pounded, dreading the consequences. But to his surprise, the manager nodded, thanked him for his honesty, and moved on to discussing solutions. Lisa, sitting across the table, looked at him with grateful eyes. For the first time in months, David felt a sense of relief, as if he had finally let go of an invisible burden. On the ride home, sitting on the L train, David opened the Bible app on his phone and reread a verse from Philippians 2:10-11, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. He realized that God's name was not only holy, but powerful. When he chose to live with honesty, fairness, and love, he was honoring that name. It wasn't merely a moral act, it was a way of reflecting God's presence in the world. That night, before going to bed, David prayed, "Father, hallowed be your name. Help me live in such a way that others see you through me. I don't want to just say this prayer, I want to live it." He closed his eyes, feeling a deeper connection with God, as if each small choice to honor him was slowly reshaping who he was. David knew this journey was only beginning. He still had many habits to change, many wrongs to make right. But the phrase, "Hallowed be thy name," had become a powerful reminder. His life did not belong solely to himself. It was an opportunity to reflect the light of God in a chaotic city, like Chicago. David Morales felt that his life was gradually changing since he began exploring the Lord's Prayer. Calling God Father had opened a new sense of connection, and the commitment to live so that hallowed be thy name became a daily reflection on his choices. Every morning on the L train from downtown Chicago to the Loop, he would open the Bible app on his phone and reread the familiar prayer. Today, he paused at the next two phrases. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. The words sounded simple, but David felt the weight behind them. He looked up the meaning of the phrases on a Bible app. A commentary explained that thy kingdom come is a call for God's kingdom, a world of love, justice, and truth to spread throughout our lives and society. Thy will be done is about full surrender, placing God's will above our personal desires. David frowned. He had always liked being in control, from meticulously planning his career path to saving every penny to pay off student loans. He wanted to have everything in his own hands. The idea of letting go and letting God lead felt both foreign and frightening. David thought about life in Chicago, where everyone seemed to be chasing their own kingdom, money, fame, recognition. He wasn't any different. He had once dreamed of getting promoted, buying a penthouse in the Gold Coast, and proving to everyone, including his father, that he could succeed without anyone's help. But as he read about God's kingdom, he began to ask himself, what kingdom am I building, mine or God's? One afternoon, while eating lunch at a faux restaurant in the Argyle neighborhood, David spoke with his sister Sophia on the phone. Sophia, studying at a university in Michigan, always had a way of looking at things optimistically. When David shared what he had been thinking, she said, I think praying thy kingdom come is like asking God to be the king of your life. Like, you're not the one driving anymore. Are you willing to let him take the wheel? Her question left David silent. He wasn't sure he was ready. At the same time, rumors of layoffs at the company were growing stronger. A Friday team meeting confirmed that David's department would lose at least 2 positions in the coming month. His stomach tightened. If he lost his job, he wouldn't be able to pay rent, let alone student loans. In a panic, David began searching for new jobs, sending out resumes, even considering relocating to a more affordable city like Milwaukee. He wanted to control the situation, as always. But that evening, sitting in his apartment, David opened his Bible and reread a passage from Luke 22:42, where Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will but yours be done. Jesus' prayer moved David. Even in the face of immense suffering, Jesus chose to surrender to the Father's will. Can I do that? David wondered. He decided to try a new way of praying. Instead of asking God to help him keep his job, he knelt beside his sofa and said, Father, I'm scared of losing my job. I want to control everything, but I know I can't. I ask that your kingdom come in my life. Let your will be done, even though I don't know where it will lead me. That prayer wasn't easy. David felt like he was letting go of a safety rope, but at the same time he sensed a strange peace. A few days later, something unexpected happened. An old colleague, Juanita, reached out to David and introduced him to a startup company in Evanston, just outside of Chicago. They were looking for a developer with his skill set, and the work environment was described as more supportive and less stressful. David interviewed and was offered the job, with similar pay and the opportunity to learn new technologies. Even more miraculously, the company had a student loan assistance program, something he had never dared to dream of. On the train ride back from Evanston, sitting on the metro, David looked out the window at the snow-covered fields. He realized that surrendering to God's will didn't mean losing everything. It sometimes meant opening doors he couldn't open on his own. He took out his phone and typed a note. Praying thy will be done is handing things over to God. He knows what's better for me. That evening, David called his mother Maria and told her about the new job. She smiled over the phone. David, when you let God lead, he takes you places you never expected, but you have to trust him. Her words reminded David that this journey wasn't just about finding a new job. It was about learning to live in God's kingdom, where love, truth, and surrender shape every decision. As he prayed before bed, David whispered, "Father, may your kingdom come into my heart, into my family, into this city. May your will be done even if I have to learn how to let go." He closed his eyes, knowing he was stepping onto a new path, one where God, not he, was in the driver's seat. David Morales began to feel a deep shift in how he viewed life since he started exploring the Lord's Prayer. Calling God Father opened up a new relationship. Living so that "hallowed be your name" taught him integrity, and praying "your kingdom come, your will be done" helped him learn to let go of control. These changes didn't make his problems disappear, but they brought a peace he had never experienced before. Each night, in his small downtown Chicago apartment, David sat by the window, watching the river shimmer, and recited the Lord's Prayer. Today, he paused at the phrase, "Give us this day our daily bread." The words sounded simple and familiar, but David felt they challenged something deep within him. Growing up in Little Village, he watched his mother, Maria, work 2 jobs, one at a Mexican bakery and another at a corner store, to raise him and his sister Sophia. Those hard years left David with an obsession for self-reliance. He saved every penny, worked overtime, and constantly worried about paying off student loans and covering Chicago's high living costs. The idea of asking God for daily bread and only for today felt like an invitation to abandon the security he had spent his life building. David opened his laptop and searched for deeper understanding. An online sermon explained that daily bread wasn't just about food, but all essential needs: health, work, protection, even joy. More importantly, the prayer teaches dependence on God each day, like the Israelites receiving manna in the wilderness, Exodus 16. David frowned. He was used to long-term planning, 5-10 years ahead, to ensure he never lacked anything, but Jesus taught him to ask only for today? That kind of trust was something David wasn't sure he had. One morning, on the Metra train from Evanston, where he had started his new job, back to Chicago, David received a text from his mother. Maria said the bakery she worked at was in trouble due to the owner's debt and she might lose her job. David's heart sank. His mother had sacrificed her life to raise him and Sophia, and now she was facing instability. He wanted to help, but with his current salary and student loan payments, he didn't have much in savings. Fear of lacking surged again, and he considered picking up a side hustle or taking out a loan. But then David remembered the prayer, "Give us this day our daily bread." He thought of the passage in Matthew 6:26, where Jesus speaks of the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap, yet God feeds them. If God takes care of the birds, won't he care for my mom and me? David wondered. He decided to try trusting just this once. That evening, in his apartment, David knelt down and prayed. "Father, I'm worried about Mom, her job, and my future. I've always tried to handle everything on my own, but today, I ask you to provide what we need. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I trust you'll take care of us." The prayer didn't erase his worries, but it brought a lightness, as if he had handed a heavy burden to someone stronger. A few days later, something unexpected happened. During a chat with a colleague at his new job, David mentioned his mother's baking skills, especially her famous tres leche cakes from Little Village. That colleague, Anna, said her sister was opening a cafe in Pilsen and was looking for an experienced baker. Anna arranged a meeting, and within a week, Maria was offered the job. With better pay, in a friendlier environment. Even better, the cafe was close to home, cutting down her commute. David was stunned. He couldn't believe a random conversation had led to such an opportunity. When he visited his mother that weekend, Maria hugged him and said, "David, I've been praying the Lord's Prayer every day, asking God to provide, and he did through you." Her words made David realize that trusting God didn't just lead to provision for himself, but also for those he loved. On his way back, crossing a bridge over the Chicago River, David paused, watching the water glisten under the city lights. He pulled out his phone and wrote a note. "Asking for daily bread is learning to trust that God is enough for today. "Don't worry about tomorrow." He remembered Matthew 6:34, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." The verse felt like a gentle reminder that he didn't need to live in fear of lacking. That night, in prayer, David whispered, "Father, thank you for providing for my mom and me. Help me keep trusting you daily, not just for bread, but for all I need." He closed his eyes, feeling a new kind of trust growing inside. He knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but the phrase "daily bread" had become a promise, that God would always be there, ready to provide when he dared to trust. David Morales increasingly felt the power of the Lord's Prayer in his life. Calling God Father brought comfort. Living so that hallowed be thy name taught him about honesty. Surrendering to thy kingdom come helped him let go of control. Trusting in daily bread helped ease his worries about the future. These changes didn't make him perfect, but they made him feel lighter, like he was slowly breaking free from invisible chains. Every evening, in his downtown Chicago apartment, David prayed the Lord's Prayer with renewed focus. Today he paused at the phrase, "Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors." This part of the prayer touched a deep wound in David's heart, his resentment toward his father, Juan. When David was 8 years old, Juan left the family for another woman, abandoning his mother Maria to raise David and his sister Sophia alone in Little Village. The rare times Juan returned were brief and always ended in arguments and broken promises. David grew up feeling betrayed, telling himself his father didn't deserve forgiveness. Whenever he thought about him, a quiet but burning anger flared up, like a fire that had never gone out. David opened his Bible and turned to Matthew 6:14-15, where Jesus taught, "For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others, your Father will not forgive your sins." These words felt like a knife. David knew he had made many mistakes, lying at work, being jealous of colleagues, acting selfishly in relationships. He longed for God's mercy. But how could he receive grace if he refused to forgive his own father? He decided to dig deeper. An online sermon explained that forgiveness doesn't mean excusing wrong behavior or allowing someone to keep hurting you. Forgiveness is about releasing bitterness, entrusting the person to God, and choosing freedom for yourself. David frowned. He had always thought forgiveness was weakness, that it let his father get away with it. But the idea that unforgiveness might be imprisoning him made him pause. One afternoon, while walking along the Chicago River, David stopped on Wells Street Bridge and watched the quiet water flow. He pulled out his phone, opened his notes app, and began writing a letter to his father, not to send, but to face his emotions. He wrote, "Dad, I've been angry at you for leaving Mom, Sophia, and me. I believed you didn't deserve forgiveness, but today I choose to let go. I release you to God. I don't want bitterness to control me anymore." When he finished writing, David felt tears fall down his cheeks. He deleted the note as a symbol of release. That night, in his apartment, David knelt and prayed, "Father, please forgive my sins, my selfishness, my dishonesty, and the resentment I've held on to. I forgive my dad, as you have forgiven me. Help me live with a free heart." The prayer didn't erase all the pain, but it brought a lightness he had never felt before. For the first time in years, David felt like he was stepping out of a prison he had built himself. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. During Sunday dinner at his mother's house in Little Village, Maria received a call from an unknown number. It was Juan. He was now living in Texas and had just survived a heart attack. His voice was weak, and he apologized for the pain he had caused, asking if he could see the family one last time. Maria, with a gentle yet firm tone, said she had forgiven him long ago, but a reunion would take time and the consent of David and Sophia. After the call, Maria looked at David, waiting for his reaction. David was silent for a moment, then said, "Mom, I've already forgiven him in my heart. I don't know if I'm ready to see him yet, but I'm not angry anymore. I want him to find peace, just like I'm trying to." Sophia held his hand and smiled. Maria embraced them both and whispered, "My children, Forgiveness is a gift God gives us so we can live unchained from the past. On the way home, as he passed the brightly lit streets of Chicago, David felt a new kind of freedom. He realized forgiveness wasn't just about his father. It was about freeing his own heart to love and live more fully. He opened his phone and wrote a note. Forgiveness is choosing freedom. God forgave me, so I must forgive. Before going to sleep, David prayed, Father, thank you for teaching me to forgive. Help me keep living with an open heart, forgiving others as you have forgiven me. He closed his eyes, knowing that the journey of forgiveness would continue. But this phrase in the Lord's Prayer had become a torch, lighting his path forward. David Morales felt that his life was gradually being shaped by the Lord's Prayer. Calling God Father brought him comfort. Living to honor his name taught him about integrity. Surrendering to thy kingdom come helped him let go of control. And trusting in daily bread eased his worries about the future. These changes did not make him perfect, but they made him feel closer to both God and himself. Every morning on the metro train from Evanston to Chicago, David read the Lord's Prayer on his phone, reflecting on each phrase. Today he paused at the two phrases, "Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." These words made David ponder deeply. He was no stranger to temptation. In Chicago, a city full of the temptations of money, fame, and a dissipated lifestyle, David had once fallen into unhealthy habits. He spent hours scrolling through social media, getting drawn into inappropriate content, believing he could control it on his own. He had also been tempted by envy at work, striving to outdo his colleagues at any cost, even withholding good ideas to prevent them from shining. But the phrase "deliver us from evil" evoked something deeper. A spiritual battle he had never considered before. David opened his Bible to 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has overtaken you, except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. These words made him realize that temptation was not merely a personal issue, but part of a larger battle where the enemy, evil, aimed at his weaknesses. He wondered, how can I avoid temptation before it strikes? And what is evil that I need deliverance from? One evening at a cafe in Pilsen, where his mother Maria now worked, David discussed his thoughts with her. As Maria was wiping down the counter, she stopped and said, "David, when I pray, 'Lead us not into temptation,' I ask the Lord to guide me away from dangerous paths. And 'deliver us from evil' means asking Him to protect us from anything that would pull us away from His love, like bitterness, fear, or selfishness." His mother's words made David reflect. He realized that temptation and evil were not only wrongful actions, but also thoughts and habits that distanced him from God. David decided to apply this prayer to his life. He recognized that one of his biggest temptations was his habit of late-night social media browsing, which led him to view inappropriate content. He had always believed he could stop whenever he wanted, but each time he fell into it, he felt empty and ashamed. Inspired by the Lord's Prayer, David began each morning by praying, "Father, please guide me away from today's temptations. Protect my mind and heart." He also made a practical change, setting time limits on his phone and replacing social media time with reading the Bible or listening to faith-based podcasts. One day, while working at his new job in Evanston, David faced another temptation. A colleague, Miguel, offered to include him in a side project that promised extra money by using the company's source code without reporting it. The sum was attractive, especially as David was still repaying student loans. But when he recalled the prayer, "Lead us not into temptation," he felt an inner voice urging him to refuse. Politely, he told Miguel, "Thank you, but I don't think this aligns with my values." Miguel shrugged and walked away, and David felt a small victory. He realized that prayer had helped him remain alert against temptation, like a shield of protection. The phrase "deliver us from evil" also made David think about larger issues in life. He began to see that evil was not only about wrongful actions, but also about invisible forces, like fear, division, or societal pressure that tried to pull him away from God. Once, when he heard about an act of violence in Chicago's West Side, David felt fear and helplessness. He prayed, "Father, please deliver me and this city from evil, protect us, and bring peace." That prayer did not immediately change the world, but it helped David focus on hope and positive action, such as joining a prayer group at St. Agnes Church. On his way home, while walking through the brightly lit streets of Chicago, David felt as though he was in the midst of a spiritual battle, but he was not alone. He took out his phone and wrote a note. Praying against temptation is preparing for battle. Asking the Lord to deliver us from evil is believing He is stronger than all that is bad. He recalled the passage in Luke 22:31-32, where Jesus prayed for Peter before he was tempted by Satan. David understood that when he prayed, he was calling upon the power of the Lord to fight for him. Before going to sleep, David prayed, "Father, please guide me away from temptation and deliver me from evil. Keep me alert and strong in this battle." He closed his eyes, feeling a renewed strength, as if God were standing by his side, guiding him through life's challenges. David Morales had come a long way since he stumbled upon his mother's old Bible in their Chicago apartment. Calling God Father had brought him comfort. Living to hallow His name taught him honesty. Surrendering to God's will helped him release control. Trusting in God's provision eased his anxieties. Forgiveness freed him from bitterness, and praying against temptation equipped him for spiritual battle. Each step of this journey, the Lord's Prayer was not just a prayer but a compass for life. Every night, as the city lights shimmered outside his window, David prayed the Lord's Prayer with an open heart. Today he paused at the final phrase, "For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours forever." These words rang out like a victory cry, a bold declaration of God's ultimate authority. David felt the strength in them, but he wanted to understand them more deeply. He opened his Bible to 2 Chronicles 20, where King Jehoshaphat faced a mighty enemy. Instead of panicking, the king led the people in worship before the battle, and God gave them victory. David realized that this phrase wasn't just a closing line. It was a reminder that no matter the battle, God reigns. David reflected on life in Chicago, a city full of uncertainty, from job pressures to headlines about violence and injustice. Recently, the startup company in Evanston where he worked had hit financial trouble after losing a major client. His co-workers, including Anna, who had helped his mother find a job, were anxious about potential layoffs. David wasn't immune to the fear. He had just found stability, and the thought of losing his job again unsettled him. But the phrase "for the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours forever" gave him a new perspective. He realized that while the world was fragile and temporary, God's kingdom was eternal. He didn't have to live in fear because God held all power. One morning, on the metro train from Evanston, David prayed, "Father, I know everything can fall apart, but your kingdom is unshakable. The power and the glory belong to you. Help me trust you, no matter what." That prayer didn't erase the challenges, but it gave him strength to face them. At work, David chose to spread hope instead of fear. During a team meeting, as everyone discussed the financial crisis, he spoke up. "I know things are tough, but we've overcome challenges before. I believe we'll figure this out if we work together and stay positive." His words, though simple, encouraged the team. Anna smiled at him and whispered, "Thanks, David. You reminded me we're not alone." A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. The company landed a new client through a tech conference David and Anna had attended. The contract didn't just save the company, it opened doors for growth. David's boss publicly thanked him for his optimism and steady leadership during a tough season. David humbly replied, "I just tried to believe that things would be okay because of something bigger than us." One afternoon, David walked along the shores of Lake Michigan, where the waves gently lapped against the shore. He paused, gazing at the endless sky, and felt a deep joy. He realized that the final phrase of the Lord's Prayer wasn't just a declaration, it was a way of life, living with the belief that God reigns even in the darkest days. He pulled out his phone and typed a note. "For the kingdom, the power, and the glory belong to God. This changes how I face everything." That evening, David returned to St. Agnes Church in Little Village, where he had once attended Mass with his mother as a child. He joined the prayer group and shared his journey through the Lord's Prayer. An older man, Mr. Lewis, said, "David, you reminded me that when we proclaim God's power, we're not just praying, we're changing the world." As he prayed the Lord's Prayer with the community, David spoke the final words with all his heart. "For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours forever." His voice blended with the others, echoing through the sanctuary. He closed his eyes and felt that he was not just a man living in Chicago, but a citizen of God's eternal kingdom, where every fear fades in the light of his power and love. David Morales stood in front of St. Agnes Church in Little Village, Chicago, the same place he used to visit with his mother as a child. The early spring sunlight shone through the stained glass windows, casting shimmering patterns on the stone floor. It had been nearly a year since he had stumbled upon his mother's old Bible in their apartment, marking the beginning of his journey through the Lord's Prayer. That prayer had changed him, not through grand miracles, but through quiet, profound steps that reshaped how he lived, loved, and trusted. Each phrase of the Lord's Prayer had become a living lesson. Calling God Father taught him he wasn't lost but a beloved child. Living to hallow his name led him to choose honesty and kindness at work. Surrendering to "Your kingdom come, your will be done" helped him let go of control and opened unexpected doors. Trusting for daily bread eased his fear of the future. Forgiving his father freed him from bitterness. Praying against temptation and evil equipped him for spiritual battles. And declaring "Yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever" grounded his faith in God's unshakable reign, no matter the challenges. Now, David was an active member of the prayer group at St. Agnes. He didn't just attend, he helped lead reflections on the Lord's Prayer, encouraging others to see it not just as words to recite, but a way of life. One evening, as the group gathered, David shared his journey. "I used to think the Lord's Prayer was just something we memorized, but it taught me how to live, to trust, to forgive, and to put God first. It's not just a prayer, it's a path to transformation, for ourselves and for the world around us." Mr. Luis, an older member, nodded and said, "David, you remind us that God doesn't just want us to say his words, but to live them." David's life wasn't perfect. His job in Evanston still came with pressure, and his student loans would take time to pay off. His relationship with his father, Juan, remained complicated. After an unexpected call from Texas, David and his mother agreed to meet him once, but David set clear boundaries, choosing to forgive without letting the past control him. He learned that forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, it chooses freedom for the heart. One of the biggest changes was how David engaged with his family and community. He spent more time with his mother, Maria, and younger sister, Sophia, cooking traditional Mexican meals and laughing like they did in childhood. He also joined local outreach efforts in Little Village, such as food distribution for the homeless, bringing the love of God's kingdom to those who needed it most. Sophia, now a college senior, teased him, "You used to just care about work and Netflix. Now you're like a missionary." David laughed and replied, "Not quite, but the Lord's Prayer gave me a new reason to live differently." One morning, David walked along the shore of Lake Michigan, where gentle waves lapped and the spring breeze carried a cool freshness. He paused, pulled out a small Bible from his jacket pocket, and slowly prayed the Lord's Prayer, letting each word sink deep into his soul. When he reached the final line, "For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours forever," he smiled, feeling a profound joy. He knew that no matter how hard life became, God was there, leading and strengthening him. Back at his apartment, David opened his phone and typed a note. The Lord's Prayer isn't just a prayer. It's a way to live, with love, faith, and surrender. Every day is a chance to live in God's kingdom. He texted Sophia, "Come home this weekend for tamales with Mom." and bring ideas to help our neighborhood, little sis. Sophia replied instantly, Dio, you're the best big brother ever. That evening at St. Agnes Church, David led the prayer group in reciting the Lord's Prayer. His voice joined the others, echoing through the sacred space. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. As they finished, he looked around at the familiar faces. Mr. Luis, Anna, and many others, all living out the prayer in their own ways. David closed his eyes, sensing that he wasn't just a man living in Chicago, but part of something eternal and greater. The kingdom of God. David's journey wasn't over. Each day the Lord's Prayer continued to shape him, reminding him to live with an open heart, steady faith, and unconditional love. And he knew that whatever lay ahead, his heavenly Father would walk with him, step by step,